Welcome to Parts 1, Understanding the Building Blocks. Today we're going to be looking at the Edit and the Draw menu. We're also going to look at how to mark objects and how to group objects. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll look first at the Line tool. This is a very simple tool. It's just going to connect point A to point B. You don't have to pick it just from the main menu. You can also select it to the left. Let's look at these icons. At the top, these two icons right here, these are our object usage icons. First we have Cut Object and Scribe Object. Unless you have the optional Scribe tip, you will always select Cut Object. Okay? Below the object usage icons, we have our draw tools. We have Line, Arc, Circle, Polyline, Rectangle, Polygon, and Slot. Over to the right-hand side of the screen, we have our edit functions. We have Gap, Trim and Extend, Delete, Move, Drag, Parallel, Rotate, Resize, Copy, Fillet, and Snip. All of these and more can be found beneath both the Edit and the Draw menu. Next, we're going to look at Arc. Under Arc, we have three different types. We have 3-point, radius CW or clockwise, and radius CCW or counterclockwise. Let's look at the 3-point arc. Now, one thing that I failed to mention when we were looking at the Line tool, anytime you select either an Edit or a Draw tool, at the bottom of the screen, it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. As you can see, it says select Start Point of Arc. All I need to do is click with my mouse. It's going to start my arc. Now at the bottom it tells me select any point along arc circumference. I'll just come up here, I'll click this point, and now it's telling me to select endpoint of arc. Whenever you have your arc where you want it, just click with your mouse to place it. Back under Draw, we'll look at the radius CW or clockwise arc. Now, with the clockwise and the counterclockwise arc, it's going to ask you to specify a radius. Let's specify a 3-inch radius. Again, if we look at the bottom, it's going to tell us to select Start Point of Arc. I'll just click with my mouse. Now, instead of asking us to select any point along arc circumference, it's actually asking us to select endpoint of arc. Okay? Right now I am at the 3-inch radius that I specified earlier. If I move beyond that 3-inch radius, my arc disappears. Okay? Because I've gone beyond its capacity. I can go from the beginning point and any point in between the end point, but I cannot go beyond the end point. Let's go back. This time we'll look at radius counterclockwise. Again, we'll specify the same 3-inch radius. At the bottom, it's telling me to select the Start Point of Arc. Now, notice instead of going in a clockwise fashion, it's producing this arc in a counterclockwise fashion. Again, if I go beyond the 3-inch radius that I specified, my arc will disappear. Let's clear our drawing. Next, we have Circle. When you select Circle, you'll get this dialog box. You can either specify a diameter or a radius. If you put something in both fields, it's going to go with the diameter or the first field. I'll give it a 10-inch diameter. I'll click on my screen to place it. Here, let me clear the drawing again. Select the circle button. Here's a little trick. If you leave both the diameter and the radius blank, we'll just say OK to this. At the bottom it's telling me, select center point of circle. I'm just going to come out here. I'm going to select the center point. And now it says, select any point along circle circumference. Okay? When you leave those fields blank, it will allow you to eyeball or free pick the size and the placement of the circle. Okay? We'll clear our drawing. Next, we're going to look at the ellipsis. At the bottom it says, select first corner of rectangle bounding ellipsis. I'm going to draw a rectangle out here. I'll go back and select the ellipsis. Now, you don't need to draw a rectangle. I'm just drawing this for demonstration purposes. But it says, select first corner of rectangle bounding ellipsis. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to select the upper left-hand corner. Once I've selected that, if you look at the bottom, it says, select opposite corner of rectangle bounding ellipsis. So I'll select the lower right-hand corner. As you can see, it's drawing this ellipsis. All four sides of my ellipsis are touching each of the four sides of my rectangle. Okay, so that's what it's talking about when it says select first corner of rectangle bounding ellipsis. You don't necessarily have to have a rectangle, but just imagine there's a rectangle out there. So let's go back to draw ellipsis. Okay. We'll clear our screen. Next, we'll look at point. At the bottom, it's telling me to select the location of point. I'll just click on my screen. As you can see, it's going to put a little plus or like a crosshair out there. If we were to draw a rectangle around this, imagine that this is a blank. Every time you see a point, if you have the optional point punch, it will allow you to punch a hole in your blank. Okay? Now, if you do not have the optional point punch, this option is useless. Okay? Let's clear the drawing. Next, we have polyline. A polyline is a series of short straight lines. When you select the polyline, when you select the polyline, it says select start point of line. I'm sorry. I gave you the wrong definition. The polyline, the best definition that I can give for a polyline is the start point of the next line is the end point of the previous line. Okay? So what I mean by that, I just now drew a line, and it's automatically connected the next line to the previous line. So the start point of my next line is the end point of my previous line. Okay? And I can keep on doing this, pretty much infinitely. Okay? When you're done with your polyline, come up to the top and click the Done button or the green check. Okay? And that's going to take away that little extra temporary line. You clear the drawing. Let's go back to draw. And now we're going to look at spline. This is what I got mixed up on. A spline is a series of short straight lines. Okay, so when you select spline, it's going to ask you for resolution. We're gonna leave this at the default resolution, which is 6. I'm going to say OK to this. At the bottom it says select points for spline. I'm going to come out here. I'm going to place a point right here, and I'm going to place another point over here. I'm going to come up. I'm going to click the green check or the Done button, and it draws a line from point A to point B. Now, because my resolution was set to 6, that tells me between each point there should be a series of 6 lines that make up this one line. So I'm going to click my delete button. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, what can you do with a spline? Let's bump this resolution up to 10. And I'm going to come out here, and I'm going to place a series of points or markers in a zigzag fashion. I'll click my Done button, and since I changed my resolution to 10, that's telling me from the start point to the first bend, there's going to be a series of 10 line segments. From the first bend to the second bend, again, there's going to be 10 line segments, and so on and so forth till we get to the end. So instead of having a zigzag line, I now have a curvy line. Okay, let's clear the drawing. And next we're going to look at rectangle. Now I've drawn a couple of rectangles, but when you select the rectangle, you have the option to enter a width, a height, and an optional corner radius. So let's say we want a 5-inch by 3-inch rectangle, and we'll put a 1/4-inch corner radius on that. I'll just click on my screen to place my rectangle. Now, like the circle, if you leave these fields blank and OK this window, it's going to allow you to eyeball or free pick the size and the placement of your rectangles. Another little trick, if say you want to free pick a rectangle, but you know that it needs a 1-inch corner radius on it, you can say OK to this, and it allows you to draw a rectangle with a 1-inch corner radius on it. Okay. Next, we're actually going to look at radial arc in a different class, so I'm going to skip that today. But next we're going to look at polygon. Now with polygon we have two choices. We have corner tangent and side tangent. We'll look at corner tangent first, and I'm going to, let's say I want 5 sides and I want a 5-inch radius. I'll click on my screen to place it. Now, this is our center point. I'm just going to place a little circle out here on our center point. Since I selected the corner tangent, that's telling me from this center point right here to each of my 5 corners, it's going to be 5 inches. Let's go back to draw. This time we'll select side tangent. Again, I'm going to tell it I want 5 sides, and I want the radius to be 5 inches, exactly like the first one. I'll say OK. I'll click on the same center point, but now instead of from each corner to the center being 5 inches, since we selected the side tangent, from each side to the center, it's going to be 5 inches. So that is the difference between corner tangent and side tangent polygons. Let's clear our drawing. Next, we're going to look at slot. Now with slot, we have two methods. Let's look at center slot. You can specify the radius, you can give it a width, and optionally, you can even put it at an angle. We're just going to leave this straight. I'll say OK. I'll click on my screen to place it, and there is a center slot. Let's go back to draw. Now let's look at points. I'm going to give this the same 1-inch radius, and with points we have two different methods. We have edge points and radii points. We're going to look at edge points first. I'll say OK to this, and let me zoom in a little bit. I'm just going to come down a couple inches. I'm going to click on this grid point right here. I've clicked, and now I'm going to start moving my pointer along. Okay, as you can see, it started the arc of my slot exactly where I selected. And as I move my pointer along the screen, I'll click to place it. It places the end of my slot exactly where I select. Let's go back to draw, slot, points. We'll give this the same 1-inch radius, and this time we're going to say radii points. I'll say OK, and I'm just going to come down a couple of inches here. I'm going to click with my mouse. Instead of starting the arc where I selected, it started the straight of my slot. Then when I click to place my slot, it's going to end the straight on the point that I select. Okay, so that's the difference between radii points and edge points. Let's clear the drawing. We'll go back to draw. Next, we're going to look at text. Okay, when you select text, you'll get this text shape window. You can start typing. If I can type. Okay, and this second button right here is the preview button. Let me click it, and it's going to change the preview window below. Okay, before we get into the other buttons up here, I want to talk about the smoothness. The smoothness is on a scale from 1 to 48. 1 being the least smooth. As you can see down here, basically what it's doing, it's taking away our points. Okay? And as you can see, as I bump up the smoothness, it's adding more points, and it's making it more rounded. So let's knock this all the way up to 48, which is the most smooth. Now, you can choose to not show the points. I can uncheck this. And as you can see now, my points are not being shown. And finally, we have this height field. The default is set for 1 inch. Right now, there is a small problem with the program, and you can only enter whole numbers. You cannot enter fractional numbers. Okay, the first button is the Select Font button. Let's click that. And as you can see, we have a list of fonts. Now, this is going to be different for each customer because it's based off of all of the fonts that are installed on your computer. Okay? So I may have more than you, or you may have more than me, but it is based off of the fonts that are installed in your computer. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to change this. I've got a stencil font in here that's really good, and if you email our tech support, they will be happy to send it to you. Here it is, Lintsec. You have a font style, regular, italicized, bold italicized. We're just going to go with regular here. And then you've got this size option right here. Now, the only thing that this size does, as you can see, the sample box, it changes the size in the sample box. Okay? It does not change the size in the program, just this little sample window. We've got a couple of effects. You can use strike through. As you see, it's putting a line all the way through everything. Or you can underline. It's putting a line under everything. I'm just going to say OK to this. It's giving us a preview right here. We can preview it at the bottom. Again, we can bump the smoothness up. And when you're ready to place this on your drawing area, just hit the Accept button. We'll click on the screen. And there you go. You can put a rectangle around it, and it's ready to have that cut out. Let's clear the drawing. We'll go back to the Draw menu. Next we have tangents. Let me draw a couple of circles out here. We'll go back to Draw. You can draw outside tangents. If you look at the bottom, it says select first circle or arc for tangent. I want to draw outside tangents from this circle to this circle, and I'll just click it with my mouse. Okay, we'll go back to tangents. You can draw cross tangents. Again, just select the circle or arcs you would like to draw the tangents to. And finally, points. This allows you to select a circle or arc and then pick some arbitrary point and draw the tangents from that circle to that point. We'll clear the drawing. We've already gone over the object usage icons. That's these two buttons right here. That's Cut Object and Scribe Object. Again, you have to have the optional Scribe tip in order to use Scribe Object. If you don't have it, you'll always want to use Cut Object. Let's see. The last thing that we're going to talk about is reference point. I'll select reference point, and then I'll just click on the screen, and it's going to draw just a little X out there. Now, I don't want you to get that confused with the regular point. Remember, the regular point is if you have the optional point punch. It will punch a hole through the metal. The reference point is just for, what it says. It's for you to refer back to that later. Okay, so let's say you were drawing something, you've got a hole, but it's getting in your way. You can move that hole or rectangle or whatever. You can move the object, place a reference point so you know where to place it later, and then place it later. So that's really just the intention of the reference point. The last thing in our list is lead-in. We are actually going to go over that in another class. So that is going to be talked about, I believe, in parts 3. Okay, now we're going to talk about the Edit menu. The first thing under Edit menu is Undo. The thing with Undo is you can only undo the last action performed. What I mean by that, let me draw a couple of circles here. Okay, so I've drawn 3 circles out here. If I were to go to Edit Undo, it's going to take away the last circle that I drew. If I go back to Edit Undo, nothing happens. you can only undo the last action performed. So if you make a mistake, you've got to catch yourself really quick. Now, that being said, we can only undo the last action performed, but there's 5 different ways to undo that last action. Draw a circle here. Again, I can select Edit, Undo. I can select the Undo Last Action button. It's this blue arrow pointing to the left. I can, with my mouse, right-click on the background and select Undo. On my keyboard, I can hold down the Control key and tap the Z as in zebra key once. Also on my keyboard, I can just hit the Escape key. That's my preferred method. Anytime I make a mistake, I'm always hitting my Escape key. Okay? So again, you can only undo the last action performed, but there's 5 different ways you can undo it. You can select Edit, Undo. You can click the Undo Last Action button. With your mouse, you can right-click on the background and select Undo. Or, on your keyboard, hold down the Control key and tap the Z as in zebra key. Also on your keyboard, you can just hit the Escape key. Okay, next we have Gap. Let me draw a couple of things here really quickly. I'm going to draw a couple of circles, and I'm going to overlap some rectangles. Let's go back. We're going to select Edit, Gap. Again, remember, if you're ever, if you forget what to do, look at the bottom of the screen. At the bottom it's telling me, select object to gap. Well, let's say we want to gap this circle. I'll select the circle, and what it's doing, it's highlighting the entire circle, and it's placing markers at each intersection point. Now at the bottom it's telling me, select first marker for gap. Well, I want to gap from this marker to this marker. Okay? Again, at the bottom it's telling me, select portion of circle to delete. Okay? Depending on which section I select, either the inside or the outside, it's going to delete it. Okay? If you make a mistake, just hit the Escape key, or any of the 4 other options. We can go back to Edit, Gap, and let's remove the inner portion. Okay? We can also gap this circle. Again, it's highlighting the entire circle. It's placing a marker at each intersection point. Select the markers you'd like to gap to and from, and then delete what you don't want. We can do the same thing with the rectangles here. Let's go to Edit, Gap. Now, when I click on one of the rectangles, I get this error. It says, you must ungroup before performing this operation. The reason being is because when we place a rectangle, we place it as a group. The computer does not see this as 4 independent lines. It sees it as a group of 4 lines. So it's asking us to ungroup this. Well, how do we ungroup? Let's say OK to this error. From the main menu, I'm going to select Group, Ungroup, All. Okay? I can now go to Edit, Gap. I can select the line, the object. In this case, it's a line that I want to gap. Again, it's highlighting the entire line. It's not highlighting the entire rectangle because it's no longer grouped together. So it just sees this line as one independent line. Again, we're going to select the marker or the markers that we want to gap. Okay? Then we'll just do this until everything is gapped away. Now, let me place a rectangle out here, and let me just kind of build on what I said about grouping and ungrouping. So I placed a rectangle. When I select drag, it's going to drag the entire group. Okay? If I go to group, ungroup all, when I go back to drag, I'll try to grab the rectangle, and as you can see, it's just dragging one line at a time. And when it's going back, I'm hitting the escape button, just so you guys know. But it is just grabbing one line at a time. Now, if for some odd reason I liked my my lines dragged out like this, if I wanted to save that group, I can regroup this. I can go to group, select either manual or box select. I'm going to select box select, and I'm just going to draw a bounding box around all of the objects. They don't have to be just lines. All of the objects. It's going to turn orange for a second, and then it's going to go back to black. And now when I select drag, it drags them around as a group. Okay? Let's clear the drawing. Actually, I'm not going to clear the drawing. I'm just going to delete a couple of things. And let's go back to this object. Go to Edit, and we're going to select Trim and Extend. Now, when using Trim and Extend, there's a couple of things that you have to remember. Let's say I want to extend this line out to the right. Well, that means I need to select this line. I need to select the right side of the line. Okay? And when I do, it's going to highlight the entire line, and it's going to place a marker on the end of the line closest to the point where I selected. Now, depending on which side that I select on the marker, it's either going to trim if I select to the left, or if I select to the right, it's going to extend. Now again, like I said, when I first selected the line, I have to select closest to the side that I want to trim or extend. So if I were to select the left side, notice the marker's on the opposite side. Again, depending on which side of the marker that I select, in this case, if I select on the left side of this, it's going to extend, or if I select on the right, it's going to trim. Okay, next we have delete. You can, basically it's going to delete any object, whether it's a line, arc, or circle, or if it's grouped together, it's going to delete the entire group. You can also just select the red X over here. That's the delete function as well. Let's clear the drawing. And I'm going to place two circles here, just one right beside the other. I'm going to select Edit and Move. Now, the Move function is a very precise function. Let's say I want to move one circle 10 inches and the other circle 5 1/4. I'll select the circle that I want to move, and then on my keyboard, I'm just going to start typing. I'll type 10 on my x-axis. I'll hit the Enter key, and it moves that circle based off of the center point exactly 10 inches. The other circle, let's say I want to go up. I'll type 0 on my keyboard, 0 for my x-axis. I'll hit the Enter key to go down to the Y field, and I can type in 5 1/4. And it moves it up based off of the center point, 5 1/4 inches. Okay. Next in line is drag. Drag is not a precise function. It just gives you a down dirty way to get something off of the screen or out of your way. Okay. So Again, move is very precise. Drag is not precise at all. Let me clear the drawing. Okay, next we have move endpoint. Okay, at the bottom, after I select it, says select object to move. I want to move this endpoint. A line has two endpoints, the start and the end. An arc as well. So when I select my line, it keeps one of the endpoints in the same spot, but allows you to move the other one. Okay. Below move endpoint, we have move vertex. Vertex is really just a fancy word for corner. Okay. So if I select the corner, wait, there it goes. It's going to drag the corner to any point that I select. Okay, below that we have insert vertex. What that's going to do, it's going to take a straight line and turn it into two lines. And I can pretty much do this infinitely, but we won't do this all day. Okay, below that we have parallel. Let me clear our drawing for a second. And with parallel, you specify an offset. Let's give this a 1-inch offset. And at the bottom it's telling me select object to parallel. Well, let's say I wanted to parallel each of these lines. All I need to do is select the object, and now depending on whether I click on the top or the bottom, it's going to parallel that line above or below, or to the left or to the right. Parallel is by far one of the most useful tools that we have. Throughout this week, we'll be talking about different ways to use parallel, but 9 times out of 10, if you're stuck in a pickle and you're not sure what to do, just think, how can I accomplish this using parallel? And usually it will work for you. Okay? Let's clear the drawing. Let's zoom in on this. Next we have rotate. Now with rotate, all you need to do is select the object, and if you select a group like I have right now, it's going to rotate the entire group. But select the object, and then on your keyboard, just type in a value. I want to rotate this 45 degrees. Okay. Below that, we have resize. Now with resize, you specify a factor. So if I wanted to double the size of my square here, I'll put a factor of 2. Then I'll click on my square, and it doubles the size. Now I don't know if anybody was paying attention, but when I made this, the size was 4 by 4. I can go to Data, select Object, and I'll click on one of the lines, and as you can see, the length now says 8 inches. Okay, so it has indeed doubled my size. Let's go back to resize. Now if I want to divide this in half, or if I want to go back to the original size, I would enter a factor of 0.5. Say OK to that, click on my object, and it shrinks it back down to the original size. Let's clear the drawing. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to place a circle out here. Next, we have copy. Under copy, we have single and multi. Let's look at single first. At the bottom, it's telling me select object to copy. I can click on my object. Now I've got a couple of choices here. I can click on the screen, and it's going to place a copy anywhere that I click. And to make those disappear, I'm just hitting the escape button. Okay? Or, on my keyboard, I can say that I want to place a copy of this. Here, actually, let me go back and select copy. Single. I want to place a copy of this 10 inches to the right on my x-axis and 5 inches up on my y. Okay, so based off of the center point, it's gone 10 inches over and 5 inches up and placed another circle. Let's undo that. You zoom out a little bit. And this time, we're going to look at multi-copy. At the bottom, it's telling me select the object to copy. I want to copy this circle. I want 2 more copies, and I can specify an X and a Y offset. Well, let's do the same thing that we did before. We want 10 inches on our X and 5 inches up on our Y. We're going to come back and look at this use center point in just a second. I'll say OK to that. And as you can see, from this center point, it's going 10 inches over, 5 inches up, and it's placed 1 copy. Then after that, again, it's gone 10 inches over and 5 inches up and placed another copy. Let me just delete these. Let's zoom in over here. I'm going to draw another circle out here. This time, we'll go back to multi-copy. Let's say we want multiple copies of this circle. We want 5 more copies, and we're going to use a center point. I'll say OK to that. And at the bottom, it's telling me select location to copy object to. Since I've selected use center point, what it really wants to know is where is that center point. I'll click on the center point, and as you see, it's giving me 5 more copies of this original circle around my center point. Let's clear the drawing. I'm going to place a couple of rectangles out here. And let's zoom into one. Okay, next we're going to look at fillet. Now with fillet, you can specify either the radius or a chamfer. Okay, so let's give this a 2-inch radius. That's really easy to radius a corner. All you need to do is select the 2 lines that make up the corner. Okay. In the same spirit, we'll give this a 2-inch chamfer. And again, just select the 2 lines that make up the corner. Okay. The last thing in the edit menu is snip. Imagine you have a virtual pair of 10 snips. Okay? And we want to place a V-notch in this blank. The first snip point is always going to be on the outside. The second one is always going to be on the inside. And the third one, again, is always going to be on the outside. Notice I was placing that in a V fashion, and it gives me a little V-notch right there. Okay, so again, the first one's on the outside, second one's on the inside, third one's on the outside. You can do this in the corners. Okay. Okay, let's clear the drawing. The last thing that we're going to talk about today is marking an object. Okay, so let me place a circle, and we'll place a rectangle out here. Now, from the main menu, I'm going to select markers. We have a couple options here: mark object, mark intersection, mark contour, place marker, delete marker, and clear markers. So let's look at Mark Object. When you select Mark Object, you'll get this Mark Object dialog box, and it's asking for a division. The default division is always going to be 2. I'll say OK to this. Now, when I click on a line, what it's doing, it's placing a marker at each endpoint, and then it places another marker in the very center. Since I said I want to divide it into 2, it places one in the very center to divide this into 2 equal sections. When I select the circle, places one in the center of the circle, and then it divides the circle into 2 halves. Now, if I want to get rid of these markers, I can go back to markers, and I can select to delete the markers. I can only delete one at a time, or I can go back and I can select to clear markers. It's going to clear all of them on the screen. Now let's go back to Mark Object, and we will give this a division of 3. I'll select the top line. Again, it's placing a marker at each endpoint, and since I want to divide it into 3, it places 2 between the 2 endpoints to divide it into 3 equal sections. If I click on the circle, again, it places one in the center, and then it divides it into 3 equal sections. Let's clear our markers. And you can select to place a marker. That allows you to place a marker at any point that you wish. Clear the markers. You can mark contour. So let's say that I want, when I mark contour, I want to divide this into 3 equal sections. I want to divide this rectangle from this point to this point, and I'm sorry, I went a little too quick. I probably should have. Let me just undo that. Go back to Mark Contour. We'll specify divide it into 3. You select your start point, you select your end point, and then you click on at the bottom, as you can see, select a point along contour. Okay, so I just click anywhere between the start and the end point, and it automatically divides it into 3 equal sections. So from the beginning to the first marker is the same distance as from the first marker to the second marker and the second marker to the end point. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Let's clear the drawing. And the last thing that I want to show you guys is the mark intersection. Okay, so if you've got a line overlapping another line, all you have to do is click on one of the lines, and it's going to mark each intersection point. Okay, that is it for today.